Hey, this is my review for the 2014 version of Annie, starring, I believe how you pronounce it is Quivenze Wallace, or something close to that, Jamie Foxx, Cameron Diaz, Rose Byrne, and Bobby Cannavale. Now, this Annie has been a story that's been around since the 20s and 30s. It was initially a comic strip, Little Orphan Annie, about a girl that was originally in an orphanage ran by the alcoholic Miss Hannigan. She's not really a good character. She's a sarcastic drunk who doesn't really care for the children she's supposed to be taking better care of, but she still has her dry, wicked sense of humor. But anyway, so yeah, she does. Annie gets selected to stay with Daddy Warbucks until they named him Will Stacks, and her and Daddy Warbucks start to interact and like each other in a way that they wouldn't have predicted before. Um, so anyway, yeah, and it throughout the years it had mostly been a comic strip, and then I think they turned into a program and of course a stage musical, and it's definitely been a few films now. The first film version came out in the '80s, and that's the one I'm most familiar with, and that is a classic to me. It's part of my childhood, and um, yeah, it's just I really like it. Like it's still funny. I still like it to this day. It's funny, and the musical numbers and the musical slash dance numbers are memorable, even though they're not. They're from back then. They're not like all flashy and real stylized like they are today. But it's still pretty damn good. And the singing, it seems like they're singing live as opposed to lip syncing. I don't know if they are or not, but like the way it was filmed and the cinematography, all the big wide sets and just all of it, it was good. Like the acting, the numbers, and the sets. Yeah, there isn't really anything I don't like about it. I mean, some people might say it's like too long or it kind of just drags a little bit. I think it's perfectly paced, and normally the story is told in about 2 hours. So yeah, I mean, it's definitely worth it's like not an unentertaining 2 hours, I think. And like I said, the performances, I all of them were good. My favorite performances were probably came from Carol and probably the actress that played Annie herself, because they're very on point. But yeah, but again, everybody else was good too. And now and for mentions of a couple of the other versions, there was the early '90s version with that Ashley Johnson. I never really bothered with that one. And then of course they did the late '90s version for like people from my time, like when I was a little kid. And it was with Kathy Bates and Victor Garber, and that one was all right. It was it seemed really kind of cheap, like like they didn't have a lot of money, so it all felt very like TV-ish and kind of small, even though it pretty much was. But yeah, I always thought that one was okay. But yeah, now fast forward to this year, they finally retelling it again and setting it to this modern time, and that always, I always thought was interesting at first. Initially Willow Smith was in talks to play Annie, and I was never against that idea. I was always, just curious. I'm like, oh, okay, well, the first off, that they're not going to go with the old typical race that she always was. They're going to update it, for from that start, and yeah, and I was always interested to see how it would be interpreted, and now that it's finally here, it didn't let me down. I mean, I don't know what the reviews are looking like, or what the general pop opinions of it are, but I thought this Annie was pretty good, and it stayed. I like that. Yeah, sorry. I like that this Annie stayed true to the spirit of the Annie story that a lot of us know, and yeah, and it's perfect for those who are familiar, especially with the '80s movie, to show this to their kids, to any kid they know that's of this time. Make them familiar with the story, because it's still kind of got the same beats and most of the same songs, which I was glad about. There's some they took out, but again, they had to modernize it make sense for today and for today's characters, and again, this particular variation of them. So, because the basics are still the same. Like Annie, she's still that kind of like spunky little kid who does does what she puts her mind to, and he doesn't really take no for an answer. Um, and Daddy Warbucks, he's usually kind of a tough, hard man and all about money first, but he softens along the story. And of course, there's his both his workers and assistants. This one, there's Bobby Cannavale. I always forget his name in the movie, but he's kind of somebody's douchey assistant. And then, of course, you have Grace, played by Rose Byrne this time, and he played this role well. He was nicely casted. And, of course, Cameron Diaz is Miss Hannigan, my favorite character. Um, it took me a little getting used to with Cameron as his character. I mean, when I first heard of her in this role, I wasn't even against Cameron in the movie, but I was just assuming she'd pretty much be like her performance in Bad Teacher, and it wasn't too far off. But obviously, it's a family film, so it had to be like toned down, and it's played in a very certain way. But Cameron, I think he did a pretty decent job, and she was funny. She delivered. She did what she was called to do. So. Yeah, but any cons about this movie? Um, but well, I mean, I think in general, I would like even though again it's set today, I get that they have to make it make sense, but I just wish they kind of laid off the whole internet famous montage and how big the internet plays in this movie. I wish it was more downplayed. But it didn't take away from the movie. I still enjoyed it, and it's heartwarming and sad in some parts, and very good family movie.